When you open ChatGPT, it feels like your question flies out into the internet, into some invisible cloud. But that's an illusion. There is no cloud. Right now, your question is flying into a massive industrial building. Not an office, not a lab, a literal factory. Inside, thousands of cooling fans are roaring. Miles of cables stretch everywhere. Pipes pumping ice-cold water run through the walls. And this entire giant machine powers up for one single reason: to answer your question. At the very center of this system, there is no artificial brain, no digital consciousness. There sits ordinary sand. The exact same sand that gets stuck in your shoes. That is where every ChatGPT answer begins. How did humanity even come up with the idea of turning sand into artificial intelligence? It doesn't think, it doesn't calculate, it doesn't store information. For millions of years, it was just sand. And suddenly, it became the foundation of the most complex technology of the 21st century. Why? Because hidden inside every grain of sand is silicon. If you run electricity through copper, it passes right through. Through rubber, it doesn't pass at all. But silicon acts like a switch. It gets a signal, it opens the path. The signal drops, it closes it. Just two states, yes or no. And that is enough to build any computer in the world. Every photo, movie, game, or even this text, everything turns into a massive sequence of yes and no. But one such switch is useless. 1,000 is useless too. ChatGPT only exists when there are tens of billions of them, all working at the exact same time, without a single mistake. And this is where ordinary sand becomes the ultimate enemy. It's too dirty. Not because of dust, but because of stray atoms. Just one foreign atom is enough to turn a multi-thousand-dollar chip into a useless piece of silicon. That is why humanity had to create sand that never existed in nature. Ordinary beach sand won't work. Nature loves chaos, but computers hate it. So the sand gets purified until there is nothing left inside but pure silicon. Imagine a blank white sheet of paper with one tiny black dot. To a processor engineer, that dot means the entire chip belongs in the trash. That's why engineers don't mine the material, they grow it. Like crystals in a lab, the result is a massive cylinder of flawlessly pure silicon. It gets sliced into incredibly thin, round wafers. They look completely empty. To make them compute, nobody drills into them or carves them by hand. Instead of tools, they use light. A beam of light literally draws the blueprint of the future processor onto the silicon surface, altering the material itself. Layer after layer, dozens of operations in a row. Billions of microscopic switches appear on the surface. Each one can only do one thing: let electricity pass or stop it. Out of billions of these primitive decisions, everything ChatGPT can do is born. It doesn't know language. It doesn't understand the meaning of words. There are no thoughts inside a processor. Only electricity, finding its way through billions of silicon switches at lightning speed. By the time you get your answer, this tiny piece of former sand has already completed more switches than a human could count in thousands of years. But every single switch slowly kills the processor. Every time electricity passes through the transistors, some of the energy turns into heat. One transistor barely heats up at all, but there are tens of billions of them, and they are all working at once. While ChatGPT is answering your question, that piece of former sand is slowly heating up. If we stop cooling it down, it will overheat and destroy itself. We learned how to turn sand into a computing machine. And now we are forced to save it from itself, 24/7. That is why massive data centers are built around these little chips, thousands of servers and cooling fans. Miles of pipes and tons of cold water, all just to keep a tiny piece of silicon from burning up. There is no cloud. There is concrete, steel, power plants, and cooling system. They exist so that electricity can race through former sand for a few milliseconds. We didn't find a material that knows how to think. It doesn't exist. We took a substance that humans walked on for millions of years, purified it to absolute perfection, learned how to control every single electrical impulse, and forced it to perform so many calculations that from the outside, it looks like intelligence. The next time you open ChatGPT, remember, you are not talking to a cloud. You are talking to electricity, which for a fraction of a second found the exact right path through billions of switches inside a tiny piece of former sand. The most complex technology of the 21st century begins with what was lying under our feet for millions of years.